See, I'm muted up. I'm gonna unmute all my dudes here. You know what? You're in for a special treat tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're joined by the true voice of Midwest sports. I would say that I would rank in the top 100, but here's number one tonight. Chris Duerr joined Muddy River Sports in August of 2025 as a sports director, following a remarkable 30-year career leading sports coverage at KHQA TV. Chris, welcome back to the Coach Show. It's been a couple years, but man, we are freaking excited to have you on tonight.
Well, I am honored to be here, Chuck. Thank you so much for the invitation, and always a pleasure with you guys.
Oh, absolutely. And he's so modest, Derek, and Danon, but this guy doesn't understand, man. We used to, like after we would do like a coaching interview, we thought we were really cool. And then Chris, obviously made us look a lot better than we were. But I think I remember, Chris, I was wearing my Crocs, and you had come in to talk to the team, and the storm was coming, and I think I fell on my ass, and you kind of laughed at me.
I would not do such a thing, Chuck.
I mean, it was my bad for wearing Crocs to begin with, but man, when my feet went above my freaking ears, I knew I was in trouble, and then, lo and behold, that's just kind of where it hits. But I want to start out fun tonight, Chris. And this one's a good one here. What's the worst press box food you've ever eaten on the road?
Well, all press box food is free, so I do not want to bite the hand that feeds me. Literally, it's all delicious.
It's a great answer.
It's like the perfect freaking answer there, right?
Yes.
So, but here's another one, right? Funniest coach quote you've ever heard, but never made print.
Oh, there are so many that I probably would have been out of a job, and the FCC would have banned me from the airways with some of the things that I've heard over the years. Some of the nonsensical things that just, I had a coach who used to speak when he got really angry in Old English, and instead of saying, between, he would say betwixt. It's just some weird things you coaches do that you fall into when you lose your minds.
Well, I'd like to say that I never lost my freaking mind, Chris, but other than me falling on my ass that day, but
I probably got plenty of video to prove otherwise. And for a small fee, I can make that disappear.
Guys, be sure to follow, definitely follow Chris Duerr. Hey, tonight's podcast, video cast, however you want to swing it, is brought to you by Riverside Resale Shop. You're going to want to check that out downtown Fort Madison today. And, not that I'm trying to get away from Chris bribing me, Derek, but I'm going to let you ask the first question.
All right. Awesome. Chris, always a pleasure to be around you. I love just getting to talk to you and everything that you do for our community and all the communities around us. So as Banks was introducing you, he talked about 30 years at KHQA, and now you're at Muddy River. What has kept you so passionate for all of these years?
I think it's the young people, and I think you guys can attest to this, because being surrounded by young people at all time kind of helps keep you young. Now, there are things they say and do that I still don't understand that make me realize that I'm not 20 or 30 anymore with some of the slang and some of the things that happen these days.
That's cap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a 6-year-old grandson who's doing this at 6'7" now, so I think we've lost it at this point. But again, I think when you feed off that energy, when you're around young people, it kind of helps keep you young, and it keeps your passion up. And I've long been a believer in the fact that so much of what has made me successful in every other arena in my life, whether it's my job or my marriage or as a father, were things that I learned on the football field. And, learned because life was hard, and learned because, life is going to roar up and punch you someday that you don't expect it right in the solar plexus. And some of the toughness and some of the resilience you learn from football has always served. So I think the mission that coaches do, that we all serve a hand in, I think that's a really vital part of not just extending the sport, but extending the culture of success with our young people. So it's easy to be passionate when you see the work result in great kids. And, for me, it's always been when I was on TV and now in a different arena, it's always felt redemptive. It's like you talk about for the first 20 minutes of a newscast, all the bad things that are happening in our community and our society. And then I get 5 minutes, or now I get unlimited canvas, which has kind of been the nice thing of going off of television and being able to tell long form stories that allow me to celebrate that. And when you're talking about positive stuff, I mean, I think that vibe catches with people. So that to me has always been the fun part of all of this.
Now, Dee and Dana, and I'll let you ask a question in a minute. He did say solar plexus and not bag. I think I think Coach Doherty would have said bag,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure. All right, Dana.
Okay, Chris. You've been in the sports media a long time. How has it changed from when you first started?
Well, you mean other than riding dinosaurs to work at that particular time? Technology is just lights out different. I remember starting in this business, and I still carry what most people consider a larger than normal camera in the industry, just because I feel like if I used one of those little guys, it's like cheating. And if my shoulders aren't killing me at the end of the night or the end of the year, then I didn't really work. But back in the day, we used to have a camera that was the size of a car, and then you had another like apparatus that had the big giant tape in it. And it's no wonder I've had 2 shoulder surgeries after that. But the technology has changed everything. It really has. There's an immediacy to the way we can deliver things now that we couldn't. I remember we had a kid who was at Culver Stockton. And we also had a kid from South Shelby High School over in Missouri. Both were playing in NFL preseason games, and they actually both made it into the game. And in fact, Ron James, who played at the University of Missouri, who's from Clarence, Missouri, actually scored a touchdown for the Pittsburgh Steelers in an exhibition game. And we were super excited. And it took me 3 days for them to mail me the physical tape to run that highlight on the air. And now we just zip everything via WeTransfer or email. I mean, it's really made the job so much easier. Social media has helped a ton. I don't have to call people up on a Friday night looking for scores anymore. They're all over Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it these days. So, the technology has changed things immensely. And it's kind of kept me, I think, and I'm not really a tech savvy guy to begin with, but it's kind of kept me having to work to get at the front edge of all of this because things change so quickly with the industry and with the technology and how everybody battles now. So that's kind of been the biggest change of all, is just how much technology has changed the world, the job, the business, and even in small market local sports.
Have you ever tripped and lost your camera or anything like that?
More times than I care to remember. I've been run over. There was an official who ran me over, and I swear that guy must have played in the NFL because I didn't hit that hard in my life. I'm standing on the sidelines. I don't see this man, and he must have been probably 5'7", 250. But man, could he move. And I went flying on the sidelines of a college game. I held onto the camera, and I don't have great hands. I was an offensive lineman, so I was proud of the fact that I maintained the camera in my hands at the back end of this, Coach Banks.
Did the coach cuss at you?
No, but the official did. He didn't like running into me any more than I liked him running me over.
Oh my God. I didn't know that Duerr would have to have a get back coach, Dee.
Yeah, no kidding.
Craziness. Nice. It is interesting, that the more I dive into this covering sports thing, and I do get I got a like the biggest follower that I have, Dee, is Chris Duerr. Sorry, you're not even in the top 10, dude. Sorry, it's just the way it is. All right, Dee, take it away.
Yeah, so Chris, growing up, I didn't watch cartoons. I watched ESPN, and I just thought, man, this is awesome. Thought maybe that's the route I wanted to go for a long time, and ended up obviously not. But what is one thing or two things that young people in the business misunderstand about the profession?
I think there's a couple. I think people think it's, you just show up and you call highlights and it's just organic, and how much of our workday actually, when I was on television would, it's like 8 to 10 hours to make 5 minutes, and how that part of the process gets lost. It's like for you guys, you just don't show up on Friday night and play. There's advanced preparation. There's planning. There's the meticulous back and forth when the plan you set up doesn't turn out quite like how you thought it was. And, the equivalent for us of you guys running into a coverage maybe you didn't practice for all week. And, something changes in the way our dynamics go. So I think people just assume it's really easy to do that. I think there's a lot of people who also assume that, behind the scenes, it's a lot more glamorous than it actually is. There are a lot of nights where it's making sausage in the slaughterhouse. You get something on the air, or you get something to your website, no matter how you do it, by hook or by crook, and 10 minutes earlier you're screaming or yelling and covered in sweat because you're trying to make something happen, and then you have to go out and be composed, which always I'm a little surprised all these years I've made it through all of this without actually having a heart attack behind the scenes. And if you did, you probably would just suck it up and deliver the sports anyway, because that's kind of the business. So I don't think people understand the preparation, and I don't think people understand the degree to when they go into this business. Yeah, there's nothing better in the world, than covering sports and being there as part of it. But there's also a lot of writing involved, and you have to love to write, because I'll tell you, Coach, that probably 80% of my day is sitting in front of a keyboard, kind of putting things together to set up the story so people understand them. So there's a lot of work that goes into the communication side of this industry.
Diego Lozano just said Chris Duerr could cover water polo, and I'd tune in. He's just that good at his profession.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
I beg to differ on that one.
Couldn't you imagine? Chris, take it away with the water polo.
I wouldn't know where to go with that. The first time I had to cover lacrosse, I was lost. I had no clue what was going on. It's like, what am I covering here? What do I call this? So I had to pull out the old lacrosse dictionary there, or thesaurus, or whatever it is that told me what I was watching. But I figured it out on the fly, because you kind of have to.
It's kind of like soccer, offsides. You just yell offsides. That's all you do. All right, Dana, you got the next question, buddy.
All right, Chris, you always give great sports stories. What makes a great sports story?
I think my favorite sports stories, and these are ones that I've always looked for, involve some element of overcoming. I mean, the great bond with sports, like my mom's not the biggest sports fan in the world, but she loves the Disney sports movies where the underdog rises, where you reveal something about somebody's character, and that's what we're looking for. I mean, at the end of the day, we're not selling sports as much as we're selling great kids and what it took to get where they're at. And I think that connects with everybody. Everybody wants to feel something positive, I think, especially about their community, whether they'll cynically admit it or not. So I think there's an avenue there of trying to tell a story that goes beyond just the surface level. Anything that's interesting in your journey that is uncommon tends to play as a really good story. And you'd be surprised how great it is. Kids who don't think they're great communicators, or kids who don't really want to stand in front of the camera, or I don't want to do this, if you can get them talking, generally it's surprising how quickly they fall into the pattern and the beat of being able to tell their story, because nobody's more an expert on anything in this world than they are in themselves. So for me, the storytelling has always kind of come from the cues that I get when I start asking questions. And that's another thing, is Derek asked what's really important about this business: asking the right questions, which is in itself sort of an art form that you develop. What have I been doing this 30 years on TV, but a couple of years of college before that. I mean, you learn over the years what's a good question and what's a bad question. And the really weird thing is sometimes your dumbest questions evoke your best responses. So again, some of it's dumb luck, I guess, for lack of a better word, but a lot of it is fun, that back and forth and trying to discern what makes each individual story special.
All right. So who gives the shortest interviews, and then who just won't shut up?
Oh, the list of people who give short interviews is just off the charts. I generally speaking, our coaches across the board do a really good job with interviews. We don't really have anybody who ducks. Now, there are on occasion. I'm not going to mention any names, but I'll cut short the number of questions I have if I think we're getting a little rambly. Not that anybody involved here would ever
Chuck
do such
Banks.
a thing.
Sorry, man.
I wasn't mentioning any names. You don't have to apologize. Could have been talking about anybody.
This is why on every interview, Danon, and I'm serious, man, he'd be like, "Come on, Banks, get to the point. Get to the point." All right. Dee Dee,
You are outing yourself here, good sir. I said nothing.
You do that a lot, Banks.
I know. And I ask a lot of weird questions. So, that
was always the fun part. I never really knew where the journey was going.
Absolutely. All right,
we
Dee.
still don't.
Hey, God. See this guy right here? He'll bite me if I touch him.
Pet him. Come on.
No,
Sure.
not
Hey,
yet.
Chris, I was thinking today, actually, I was thinking about this podcast that we were having today. We were driving back from St. Louis. I'm not a guy that has to drive a lot. And I was thinking, man, Chris Duerr has put in miles and miles of windshield time, which brought up this question kind of off the wall.
Okay.
Podcast guy, music guy. How do you get through all those miles?
So I listen to a ton of music, and Apple Music has kind of changed the dynamic where you can listen to anything at any time, pay one fee and do that. But there's a surprising amount of time, Derek, that I spend in the car talking to myself about like what's going to be in Duerrisms. And I'll have the recorder on just so I have ideas when they pop into my head. There's an inordinate amount of, windshield time that's spent talking out ideas for columns or stories because I am in the car so much and there's not an office and you really can't type while you're driving or do anything like that. So I've become, voice to tape guy. So I know exactly what it is that I want to write. And I found over the years, it's kind of cut down the number of hours I've had to spend. The column, the Duerrisms column that we write during football, that's its own labor of love. It usually takes a couple of days to come together. But if I can do voice to tape, I've got that. I just have to edit myself. And that's helped a ton. But I'm not a big podcast guy unless I'm like on vacation and I can sit down and enjoy it. Or, we drive across country every year to go see my parents out in California. So we'll do podcasts then. But for the most part, it's either music or me yammering to myself, which I'm sure evokes more than a few people looking at me and wondering who the weird guy is in the Jeep who's talking to himself the entire time.
Well, as long as you're not answering yourself or,
Fair point.
All right, so that the fine print's really low. I can see Ryan Bowen on there. Dee Dee, you're gonna have to read it.
Yeah, so it says, I grew up watching Chris on KHQA News. Some of my first and best sports memories were watching Ryan Bowen play at FMHS. Was Chris around for any of that or on the news yet by that time?
I was not, although I met Ryan when he was at Iowa because he was back from Fort Madison games and got to see him play. He played an all-star game in Southeast Iowa, which was the first time I got to see him live. And, that was really cool. And we obviously knew, I guess I was here for, I think, his last 2 years in college. And then, as luck and fun and happenstance would have it, he spent a period of time out in Sacramento as an assistant coach in my hometown. So it's kind of funny the way things kind of turn around. And, I remember him being there, I think this was the Bigler era, that there were a lot of really cool things. And he was always back for that, which I always thought was really, really cool. And, that connection was awesome. So yeah, got to know Ryan just a little bit, but what a great talent. Wish he would have been here for his high school days. I think that would have been something very, very special to watch.
Now, when you were at the University of Missouri, okay,
yes.
were you there to cover like the infamous fifth down?
I was there for the fifth down. I was not on the camera for the fifth down. I was back setting up. We had like the University of Missouri journalism school has like 8 kids covering one game. So my job that night as a relative rookie was to set up the tripod in the back for the post-game press conference, having no idea how big a press conference that was going to be.
Now, take us back to that press conference. I can only imagine the sparks that were flying.
Oh my, yeah, it was one of the most insane things because it was just such an infuriating miss. And I mean, it probably has to go down as one of the biggest officiating gaffes, period, in the history of college football, if not football writ large. And, I just remember the raw emotions in that room more than anything else. And my goodness, and the questions never stopped that night. I'm a Cub reporter, rookie guy, just hoping not to screw anything up because I know what's coming over the press conference is pure gold at that point.
Now, how much did you have to like mute? Like beep, beep, beep.
No, I mean, those environments are really quite professional, especially back in the day. It seemed like there was a little bit more decorum about it at that point, but it was clearly one of the most impassioned press conferences I've ever been to. And again, I was young enough in my career that it was incredibly eye-opening. Now, I had some times I will tell you that, I watched Norm Stewart blow up after basketball games at reporters, at rookie Cub college reporters particularly. And, that kind of gave you the incentive to ask really good questions as well, because you didn't want to be that guy that Stormin' Norman blew up at a press conference in front of all your friends and colleagues.
The closest that I think we could get to that, DD, would be like to ask the Brands brothers, why are you guys performing so poorly?
Man, I would not want to be the guy that asked that question.
Huh?
Nope.
All right. So, Danon, you got the next one, buddy.
All right. Why did you decide to make the move to Muddy River Sports in 2025?
I'm tending to get that question a lot these days, and it really kind of has changed a lot of my life this year. It's the first time in 30 years that like my viewing area isn't what my viewing area used to be. And that's nobody's fault. That's simply a credit to the fact that Muddy River is in its 5th year of existence and we're growing slowly. And they made a major investment to bring me in. So the idea is to stage it, prove we're successful, which I think we've had a very good first year so far, and continue to grow as best we can to kind of get back to where we were. As far as me, the dynamics of the place that I had worked, I have no problem with anybody that I ever worked with at KHQA. Anybody who was ever in that building from the management standpoint down, phenomenal people, love those people to this day. I can't say the same for corporate ownership and some of the changes they've made with that enterprise. And after 30 years, I felt like I had earned the right to do sports in my market. And their decision to take KHQA and KTVO and just jam them together into this inelegant mix of 2 markets where you're not giving either market the coverage that they got before was infuriating. And the strange thing about television is I just can't quit. I don't have that ability because of my contract. I can only leave when my contract is up. So I knew for 6 miserable months that I couldn't do this. It was the first time in my life that my job, which has given me such joy for 3 decades, was joyless. And, maybe it's selfish on my part. I don't know. I just didn't want to share my time. And I felt like, I feel like most nights, even, and KHQA was always incredibly generous. I'd have 10 minutes on a Friday night. I had 30 minutes on Saturday night with overtime. And all I did was talk about our area. And at the end of the week, even on the best week, I felt like we didn't get to everybody. I couldn't do all the things that I wanted to do. And then when that time got cut in half, it was just like, I got to find something different. I got to throw my hands up and do something different. And I'm really fortunate that I get a chance to work with Matt Schuckman, who's been my friend for years. And for my money, the best sports writer on the planet. I don't think there's anybody who writes quite as well as Schuck does. I mean, this is a guy who can summon whole galaxies of emotion from a 5 5-word sentence. And I've never seen anybody like that. And getting to work with him on the daily now has kind of been energizing on that front as well. So again, I have no hard feelings to anybody that I used to work with, or, I want those people to succeed, but I also know that, corporate has done them an incredible disservice and put some handcuffs on them. And, I'm too old. I'm too long in the tooth in this business. I've worked too hard. I wasn't going to go down with that ship.
Well, tell Shock that Dog Pound will take care of this northern section. Anyway, no, did I say that out loud, Dee?
I heard you say that out loud. It's been really weird, and it's just, like I said, there are things that I miss so much that I haven't gotten to yet, and it's not like my market has completely shrunk. I'm 8 schools short of what I used to cover, but those are 8 schools I love. So, it's a concession, but it's a small concession for the now, hoping to build a better future.
But I do gotta throw out there. I remember seeing you and like all of our local media, confidants. We were up at Fort Madison when Keokuk played them. I think that was Guzman's 50-pointer, and I was and I just looked around because I was calling the game, with Dog Pound. I just kind of looked around and I was like, man, this is freaking awesome to be able to rub elbows with all these dudes.
Yeah, it's a really collegial environment with what we do, but I don't think that's different for most of you. I think generally speaking, there are probably some coaching staff that you don't get along with as well as others, but for the most part, you go to Glacier, you hang out with these guys, and you go to these clinics like the one Brad Dixon throws down here, and people are fun away from the business when you're not competing with each other. And that, to some degree, I think, I have a lot of mutual respect for the people that we work with, and, the chance that I get to rub elbows with some of these people. And, I think sometimes we take for granted in this market how good the sports journalism is with people who have been here, because we're kind of spoiled. I grew up in Sacramento. We never got coverage like the high school kids get at this level and this intensity. And it's not one enterprise. It comes from everywhere. So I think everybody feels the call of that. And you're right, Chuck. It is cool to be in that, kind of in that fraternity, because everybody is such good people. And I think we all have kids' best interests in mind when we go to work here. And there's nobody in this market now doing this job that, I would think would ever do anything to harm a kid in any way, because I think we've got really good professionals here, intentionally, or unintentionally. I think people understand it. They understand the difference between this and the NFL, and, criticism, and, being 18 years old versus being, 27 years old and getting paid millions of dollars to do it. I think everybody understands the dynamics here. So we do have a good group of journalists work in this entire area.
Now you get to know these all your coaches at a very ground level. What's it like when they're they're being cut loose, or they go to a different job? Does your stomach get turned up in knots sometimes?
It does. It's hard because they're friends. They're professional friends, but they're friends nevertheless. And you have working relationships, not just with the head coaches, but I've always prided myself. I've had great working relationships with assistant coaches across the board. And I know how important that is. And honest to God, it's kind of self-serving as well, because some of the best tidbits and information I get going into a season come from the assistant guys who pull me aside. There are places where, there are pools going, okay, who should be my preseason pick to click before anybody knows about them. So I'm not a genius. I rely on the information that's coming from the inside of your programs to tell me this stuff. So, but yeah, they're friends. They're people that you root for at a personal and professional level. And when people get fired or when they move on, it's incredibly hard, because that's a relationship that kind of changes. And you may not see that person in the same way, because when I'm going to practices all the time, we're hanging out, we're checking in on each other's families, we're doing that kind of stuff. But when that ends, that it's like moving on in life in different directions, and you don't see those folks as much. So yeah, I do get that way, and particularly some of the things, and I'm going to say this because I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but a lot of the things that go on now with backdoor politics and school boards and things that happen that are very motivated by personal interest rather than the best interest of the kids writ large. Those things are really hard to watch, and see friends who are in the industry get chased out when we think they're doing a very good job and somebody else's agenda has come into play.
Happens all the time. Now, Dee Dee,
Everywhere.
this is why every time that Chris sees me, he runs, because I like waste his time sometimes. But anyway, it's my ADHD, man. It's just what it is. All right, Dee Dee.
Welcome to the club, buddy.
I suffer from it too. So, Chris, you kind of touched on this, and I could feel the passion right away. So I want to go back to it. You've covered thousands of games, obviously. What makes high school sports so special?
I think for me, Derek, it's a couple of things. One, it's the sense that it's more than sports. It is a community gathering. In the old days, like the Greeks had the agora, where everybody kind of came together, and that was the only place you could shop and meet and be with people and get what you needed. But there was something collegial and connective about that. And in a society where we're increasingly driven away from one another, because social media is kind of made things less personal in this world. I think we need that. So, to be able to go on a Friday night and to feel a community pull together in one direction, nobody's politics or religion or anything matters at that moment except your love of, in this case, the Bloodhounds. It all pools and brings us together, and we need more connectivity. I also think it's really cool. I cover 3 states. I think at one point we were covering 48 football programs, and God knows how many boys and girls basketball programs. But when you're doing that, every single place you go is different. There is something different about the community. Each community has its own unique source of pride. There are places that are cross-country communities. There are places that are wrestling communities. There are places that are tennis communities. It's really neat the way people get into having a reason to puff their chest out, regardless of what that reason is. And sports obviously is something so visceral and fun for us to be in the stands and root. But I love that pride exists in other areas and other arenas in the schools. I mean, we've got some great fine arts high schools in our communities, and some of the plays and musicals that get put on. I mean, I know that over in Missouri, we've got a couple of nationally recognized FFA schools that every year go and win national championships. And what a source of pride that is to the community. So I think, Derek, at the end of the day, it's all about the pride and that good moment that people get to stand up and feel proud of where they are, where they're from, the kids in their community, their neighbors, their friends, kids, whatever it is. I think everybody feels connectivity to it. And again, I'm a firm proponent in this day and age that the more connected we get, the better our chances of not tearing each other apart are in this world, which all we got is each other at this point, and for all the divides that are thrown out there, we got to find some connectivity in this world.
Absolutely.
All right. So I'm going to throw this up there. I can see it a little bit better. Scott Meller says, anytime that you saw Chris with a camera, it amped everybody up just a little bit more. And I'm not going to lie, man. When I saw the cameras, I didn't cuss as much, Derek, as a head coach. I didn't throw things. I mean, he really brought out the positives in me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm humbled by that, because I know what your inclinations might have been, Coach.
What is he doing?
If I can have any hand in your betterment in this world, I feel like I've succeeded.
We need to have you just tag along with us all the time, be around Banks.
Be a freaking blast, but oh my God.
I wouldn't want anybody following Banks around.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I think we need to get Chris and Shuck on at the same show.
That would be
well,
awesome.
Yeah, and then we could follow you around. And you want to talk about reality TV? My God, the people that would watch that disaster.
They'd be like, "Oh, gee, what's Chuck up to now?" No, they wouldn't. They'd be like, TMI, right? TMI. All right. Is sports media too soft on star athletes?
At the professional level, I think it's gone the other way. I think people are now in this day and age, and I've heard some horrendous takes in every sport from, national sports media about the way, It's very attack oriented. It's very shock jockish anymore. I can't watch some of the stuff that's on ESPN anymore just because we'll say nonsensical things just to get reactions. And that stuff is not sports journalism to me. And I am not a big fan of the whole first take style of things that are out there. And I say that respectfully because one of my proteges and really good friends works at ESPN, and Tyler Fulgham, who I'm proud came out of our community and came out of KHQA and has gone on to big things on the Daily Bet there and hosting some sports center. So I don't speak ill of ESPN, but I don't like that part of what they've done to change the tenor of sports journalism. I have no problem with being critical of an athlete who's being paid a lot of money, who's not performing in a way that shows effort or passion. I have no issue with that. But when we start throwing up BS takes about this and that have nothing to do with what we're seeing in the field of play, that bothers me. And I quite frankly have kind of turned off the dial on that, and will do other things. And, and there are still a lot of folks out there who are doing sports the right way. I get up anymore and, I watch the Major League Baseball Network morning show because it's done so well. With DeRosa and those guys on there, that I think they do such a great job, just talking the nuts and bolts of baseball. So I've kind of gravitated back to something that's a lot more, I guess, concrete rather than opinion based in what I like to see as a sports viewership consumer of journalism at the national level.
Okay, greatest NBA star of all time. Come on now.
For my money,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's Jordan, and I don't think there's. I mean, I'm not one of these people that needs to tear down LeBron. I'm not one of these people who would tear down Kareem. If you said Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was the greatest, basketball player of all time, I think there's an argument for Bird. I think there's an argument for, if you want to go back far enough, I think there's an argument for Oscar Robertson. So, I think everything is contingent on the time and era and when you play. And when we talk about best all time, there are so many variables now and differences that it just kind of seems like a nonsensical argument. So, I mean, we know greatness, right? That's the beauty of living in a time and being proud of the time that you were from. I listened to stories of my grandfather talking about Roberto Clemente and how he was the greatest baseball talent he'd ever seen in his life. And I have no point of access other than, knowing what a great human being Roberto Clemente was and doing all the reading afterwards. But I mean, I think it's all temporal, guys. I think it's all based on the era you're in, and you're always going to defend what you see. And we're all kind of in our lives prisoners of the moment. So I was there for the best of Jordan. I've watched LeBron do great things. I've watched, countless guys in my era do great things in the NBA. Unfortunately, none of them played for the Sacramento Kings, and so I continue to suffer. What am I, 55 years old now since they moved to town in 1985. It's kind of like being a Cubs fan, without the World Series championship, kind of like just, self-torment at this point. But I'm Opus Dei, baby. I wear my pain on my sleeve.
All right, Didi.
That's awesome. So you've been around some phenomenal coaches, phenomenal programs. In your opinion, what is it that the championship programs do that the average ones don't?
First and foremost, consistency. I think the longer you can keep a staff together is critical. And I think we see a lot of challenges with that in this day and age, because a lot of these staffs that have been really good and were young guys coming up together, when you have wives and kids and other interests enter the equation, it's a lot harder to keep that staff continuity. And the best staffs I've ever seen, those staffs operate on a daily basis almost organically. You don't have to know what your defensive backs coach or your special teams coach is doing because they know the mission. So I think that's one of it. I also think in this day and age, the best coaching staffs go the extra mile with kids to make it as fun for kids as they humanly can, because every generation is different. I think this generation of kids is constructed differently. And you'll hear a lot of old school people go, oh, these kids today aren't this, aren't that. They were just raised differently. And you've got to find a way to connect differently. I mean, if you're not evolving at the beginning and the front end of this as a coach, then you're the problem. It's not the kids. It's you've got to find a way to connect with people, because at the end of the day, any kind of business you do is human relations based. And for coaches, it's finding a way to get them invigorated about the work. One of the things I love is when I see kids who are quote unquote, not interested in the weight room, discover a passion for that because they discover through self-discovery led by coaches, their human potential and how they are directly involved and responsible for how great they can become as an athlete based on the work they put in. What is more elemental and organic than that? And that is extended for every generation that's ever touched, a dumbbell or a barbell. It's like if you figure this out and you can get kids passionate about self-improvement, man, you're doing a great job as a coach. And in this day and age, I think we still have people that do that. But again, I think it's the extra mile and it's the consistency of having great staffs, because you can't do everything as a head coach. That's that's the thing that I constantly marvel at is I don't think our assistant coaches in this area get enough credit for how good they are at what they do. And there are probably, if somebody asked me tomorrow to recommend hey, we're looking for a head football coach, I could probably name 24 assistant coaches right off the top of my head that would be perfect for that next job. Although a lot of them would probably never leave because they like the situation they're in. They like the coaches they work with. Those relationships, as you well know, DD, that's different because that's your family now. And you've got a lot of guys that have been with you from the jump in this. So, it's hard to leave those relationships. So I think those are the two main things that make coaching staffs that are successful. It's a passion and finding ways to invigorate kids, and it's having great people around you.
Got to take this moment. You're watching the Coach Show, presented and brought to you by Riverside Resale. If you'd like to be a guest, you can email me, coachingcultureandathletics@gmail.com. That's coachingcultureandathletics@gmail.com. Another thing, listeners, just so you know, you got to listen to this man here in the bottom left-hand screen because he doesn't skip leg day.
Not anymore. I was the human embodiment of skipping leg day for a long time just because I have these skinny, girlish legs that I can't get to grow. And it infuriates me. But my New Year's resolution was because actually, I've reached that certain age where, ailments start to happen. And I did the research. And if you have a strong core, if you have a strong lower body, if you ever do have a back surgery or a replacement surgery, you recover exponentially quicker than anybody else. So, I think, and I still love going into the weight room. It's the one place, it seems like you can rid yourself and divest yourself of stress really quickly. I can't throw away around the weight that I used to back in the day, but I can still do enough of it where I feel like I'm young and more vital than I actually am. So, so yes, but I am not skipping leg day anymore. This is my New Year's resolution. And so far, so good, but it is miserable, and squat racks and hack squats are just awful.
Speaking of leg day, Coach Cowboy, what's your next question?
From your perspective, what does a healthy program culture look like?
I think it looks vibrant, and that it can look that way in a lot of different ways. But if there's energy within what you do as a coaching staff, that's tangible and palpable. And you can't. I got a great piece of advice when I went into this business, and I actually moved here. My mentor in this business is a guy by the name of Rod Smith, who's been doing sports down in Jefferson City, Missouri, for almost 40 some odd years now. I think he's closing in on like 47, 48. And one of the things he told me when I came here was, hey, I don't care if you plan on staying in Quincy, Illinois for 6 months or the rest of your life. Where your feet are is home, and if you try to fake that, if you're not genuinely involved in that, if you don't feel that and act that way, viewers will know. Everybody can smell a fraud. Like you can't fake it and you can't hide it. So you better be passionate about where you are at that moment in time and live it like you're going to be there forever and like it matters. And I think that's the same thing with a coaching culture. Your vibrancy can play out a number of different ways, but you can't fake passion for kids, and you can't hide passion for kids. And we know when you love your players and when they matter to you. And it's the smallest betraying actions that you may do. Pulling a kid aside who's struggling during a practice. Maybe, a head coach who actually, walks down to the third string guy and just says a few words in his ear, or compliments him after a particularly strong practice. Scout team guy who has a great day. I mean, those are the things that you have to celebrate victories in this world for kids. And you have to keep them engaged, because negativity in this generation does nothing. And if you're not celebrating that, then you're going to fall apart from the bottom out. You have to have all of those layers of your team engaged, involved, and passionate. And that to me is the indicator of a great coaching staff. Is you can see the level of scope and involvement of your vision, how much you're paying attention to the smallest details, because those smallest details are kids whose lives are being impacted and kids who are devoting themselves to you. So to me, vibrancy is huge. And, again, there are days where we all want to, tear our hair out over this missed assignment or that missed assignment. Or in my case, things that go badly behind the scenes at a television station. Clearly, the scalp didn't last very long. But, you can't fake the love of what you do. And I think kids feed off that. So to me, that vibrancy is key and critical in establishing a great coaching culture.
Now, I see it all the time, and I want to make sure that you you give shout out to that grandbaby, right? You spend a lot of time with that baby, and yeah, I'm gonna guess that this new move has also allowed for more grandfatherhood, right?
It has actually went to my, what is it? Probably my third youth basketball game, and they're not very good at dribbling yet. But my grandson was the player of the week. He had 2 buckets and was bouncing around on his toes the entire time. So we took Banksy out yesterday after I got done with all my duties for a big Italian dinner. He likes pasta red sauce. So we celebrated his big basket. And he's got his mom and dad's size, so he's probably going to be 5'10" at best when it's all said and done. So basketball is probably not the long range career goal. But yeah, I mean, as much as I loved being a father, and it's great work, and it's the most rewarding job you'll ever have. Being a grandfather is like eating dessert first. It really is. It's like, you get to do all the fun stuff, and then when they start getting a little bit, on edge or whatever, you send them home to mom and dad, and it's perfect. And I have 2 now, so we have a 1-year-old granddaughter who was wandering around the house today telling me and Nana, no, Pop, no, and waving her finger at us. So she's a very willful child who reminds me a lot of her mother. And in that, there's going to be some justice for all the times I had doors slammed in my face. And you don't understand me, Dad. I think the karma of it all is coming back around as well.
Well, we don't have Jolt anymore to send him home with, but I'm sure we can find something, right?
Yeah, red dye number 5 or whatever it is, and all the sugars. That's the ultimate grandparents' revenge. Spoil them, send them home full of sugar, and you get a little measure of revenge for all the years you had to deal with that as a parent.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, so you, Dee Dee and Cowboy, you got to think of the most important question that you ever wanted to ask Chris Duerr. Putting you in the hot spot.
Okay.
Go ahead, Cowboy.
He's thinking.
What is the most underrated sport that you've covered?
Underrated sport that I cover that I enjoy covering. Boy, there are a couple. I covered collegiate gymnastics back when I was at the University of Missouri. And people don't understand how much fun that is to watch as a spectator sport. Because it was a super high level sport. And, the University of Missouri was always really good at that. And the things that these girls can do that, we watch them during the Olympics or whatever, but when you are right there and they're, going across the floor exercise and flipping all over the place, that's pretty cool. I've enjoyed covering bowling in Southeast Iowa, to be honest with you, because it's such a unique challenge with how you shoot it. And I'm to the point where I've shot everything pretty much in my life. I like things that are hard that kind of challenge me with a camera on my shoulder. So bowling has kind of been interesting and fun to do over the years. I've always been a wrestling guy because I was my little brother's pinning dummy. So I think wrestling is probably highly underrated outside the state of Iowa, where it's religious and a religion in its own right. But I spent last a couple of days this week down at the state wrestling meet in Missouri, and I don't know that it's as well done as Iowa's or Illinois', but it's just a fun environment. Heck, I like cross country. I like the fact that there's a culture that's built into the cross country folks, and they all run up afterwards and congratulate each other. And the person who finished first waits around for the last person to finish and applauds them coming across the line. So there's really not a sport I don't enjoy. You just have to find ways to modify your enjoyment and seek joy from it. So I like it all, to be honest, except I can't shoot tennis very well, so that's probably the one that I struggle with.
Are you ready for women's flag football, Chris?
I'm actually kind of excited about this. I got a chance to kind of talk to some friends. Mark Grounds, obviously, down in Jacksonville, who was heading up the program at Illinois College. I'm excited about this. I'm excited about what girls wrestling has done for girls who were cut out of a certain loop in sports. If you didn't play basketball in the winter, what were you going to do? So I like these ideas of bringing more people to the fold through athletics, whether it was, high school girls wrestling, which is blowing up now. The really weird thing with girls wrestling was we had like a top end and we had a bottom end and we had no middle. And now we're starting to get a middle of kids who are a little more skilled, and it's kind of fleshing things out. So I think we're going to see the same thing with flag football for women. It's a great opportunity for an underserved group of athletes who never really got their moment. So I'm super excited about this.
Derek, I have my big question, but if you want to go first, I'll let you.
I'm ready. But if you want to jump me, go ahead.
Nah, I don't want to jump you. That might make your wife mad.
Jeez.
Sorry, guys. I had to.
He has to.
Yes.
All right, Chris. So my question is, I watch a lot of sports, and I'm a sports nerd. I think that you are the best, and that's putting you with the guys that are on national television, everything. I just think how you go about things, your eye for a great story is unmatched. I know that you've probably had tons of opportunities. What has made you stay in this area? I mean, you're from California. You could have gone home. What has made you stay in our area? And we're thankful, by the way. But what has made you stay here?
You're incredibly kind, Coach. I think I had to prove to myself that I could go somewhere before I could stay. And 2 years into the job, I got a chance to go interview for a job in a much bigger market. And I went down there and I aced they make you do a fake sports cast. And they could have been lobbing grenades at me. I was catching the grenade, putting the pin in, and ad-libbing my tail off. And at that moment, I realized that, if you go to a bigger market, it's not like the teleprompter is like suddenly in Cyrillic. It's the same job. It's not any more difficult. But they offered me the job on the spot, which was very validating at that particular time. It meant this thing that I had chosen to do, I must be pretty good at that point, if they're willing to hire me from this pool of 100 other applicants. And then they told me that we only do 2 minutes of sports. And I'm like, I can't say hello in 2 minutes, Derek. You know me. I have too much passion to be bound up by those kind of restraints. And I started looking at what I had and the fact that here, if I wanted to do 10 minutes of sports, this culture loves sports enough that it justified it and it paid for it and it made my employer money. And my employer then, by extension, because I was making them money, gave me the freedom to do whatever was next to make them more money, which allowed me to fill my passions and their bottom line. So this sports culture is hands down as good as any I've ever been around. People care. It's water cooler talk. High school sports is water cooler talk at businesses around the tri-states. People genuinely care. People care because I think they love where they're from. And in this tiny little corner of the world that wasn't originally my home, that I've now lived in longer than I've lived anywhere else in my life, it became my home because I'm around like-minded people who love sports and who love kids and who have a passion for where they're from and are proud of it. And to be honest with you, every time I go back to California, I think somebody's going to run me over in the parking lot of Costco. People here are so friendly and so great. And it's not Pollyanna-ish. It's the truth. You have great neighbors, and that makes it really hard to want to leave a place that people love what you do, appreciate what you do, appreciate what kids are out doing. I mean, this is kind of my heaven, for lack of a better word.
That's great.
All right. So, what's one moment you witnessed in sports that fans never saw, but it told you everything you needed to know about that person?
Wow. Man, I've seen good and bad behind the scenes. I mean, you just have, and some of the things you can say and some of the things you can. I mean, it's all the human condition, baby. I mean, that's what it is. It's just, sports is just a stage where the human condition plays out. But I've had some experiences along the way that are things that I wouldn't trade. And, I was at Colgate University in New York covering Western Illinois football in the national quarterfinals. I believe it was 2001 or 2002, in the biggest snowstorm, the snowstorm of the decade, maybe the century it was, where we were the last plane to fly into Syracuse, New York from Macomb, Illinois, and went and watched the most perfectly played football game in 14 inches of snow from the beginning to the end of that game. And it was a well-played football game. And there were like 7 people in the stands. And I'm sitting here with a camera on my shoulder in full snow regalia, having the time of my life. And in that moment, I went, man, is there any other job in the world you would trade for this? Standing outside, freezing your tail off, watching a football game that was played extremely well given the conditions, and enjoying this where other people would think you are nuts and crazy and certifiable. That's when you know you found your passion in this life. When something that nobody else would want to do was your favorite day of the year, that means you're in the right spot.
My most favorite day of the year was not falling because I was wearing Crocs, and he chuckled. Anyway,
dude, I could have told you about the Crocs if you would have asked me to get started on that.
I know. Hey,
You're still rocking them.
I know. Do you have any special shout outs other than those grandbabies?
No, I first of all, appreciation to all of you guys for bringing me on. Always a pleasure to talk with you, because I know we all share an awful lot in common about what matters to us in this world. So that I'm appreciative of. To my friends in Southeast Iowa, I miss you. I'll be back soon. I swear to you. We're gonna make this happen over the course of this next couple of years. And again, I think we've made some inroads. I'm super excited about that. And every time I show up at Fort Madison, I get, when are you coming back up here? Why did you go away? So it's good to be loved. I think absence makes the heart grow fonder a little bit. My favorite ticket taker gives me a hug every time I come up to a Fort Madison event and tells me how much she misses me. So that's part of what makes me want to get back. It's nice to have people who love you, for doing a job that you would do for nothing, and is the easiest gig on the planet. So, but yeah, I mean, just a shout out to everybody who supported this journey along the way, supporting the new journey, which I know is a lot to ask of people. 55 years old is old in life to make this major of a change, but I'm pretty proud of the way it's gone, and I feel like my happiness is back. So, and if if I don't say this, I'm in big trouble. Shout out to my beautiful wife Angie, who, without her, there is no center. I'm adrift. So I'm pretty blessed and lucky in all facets of this life.
Dee Dee, what's up with all these 55-year-olds that make me look old?
I don't know,
Dude,
man.
I don't know. Hey, let's see. Thanks, Chris. We appreciate it. Stay on here just real quick.
Absolutely.
If you would like to be a guest on the Coach Show, you can email us, coachingcultureandathletics@gmail.com. That's coachingcultureandathletics@gmail.com. We hope that you have an amazing week. And then also, I do have to throw out there, I think Mama Doherty thought we were live 2 shows ago. But on Sundays, I kind of amp these babies up, and you get to watch them all day long. Hope everyone has an amazing week.